The first time he saw her dance, he fired her. It was 7 o'clock in the morning. Rain tapped softly against the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse like a secret being whispered from the sky. He stood motionless in the doorway, briefcase in one hand, coffee untouched on the marble counter. She didn't hear him come in. She was barefoot on the polished oak, eyes closed, swaying to music only she could hear, some old song humming through her phone's cracked speaker. Her hands lifted slowly, fingers brushing invisible stars. A yellow dress, faded at the hem, spun with her like sunlight given form. For those few seconds, the apartment wasn't cold steel and silence. It was warmth. It was memory. Then she opened her eyes and saw him. Her smile vanished. The music stopped. "You're fired," he said. No warning. No discussion. Just those two words, sharp as glass, cutting through whatever fragile peace had settled in that moment. "I'm sorry, sir," she stammered. "I was just. You were dancing in my home. That's not part of your job. But I finished cleaning. Your job is to clean, not perform." He turned before she could speak again. The elevator doors closed behind him, sealing the silence. By noon, her keys were deactivated. By evening, her name was erased from the building log. By midnight, it was as if she'd never existed in that towering fortress above the city. But then, 24 hours later, he called her, begged her, to come back. And not because of the spotless floors or the perfectly folded linens. Because the moment she left, something inside him cracked. And he began to remember. Not just her, but who he used to be. There was a time when music lived in his bones. Long before the headlines called him the Ice King of Wall Street, before his face appeared on Forbes lists wrapped in cold admiration, before the boardrooms taught him to bury every soft thing beneath layers of control, he was a boy who loved to dance. His mother used to play vinyl records on Saturday mornings, salsa, boleros, songs from her village in the Dominican Republic. She'd pull him from bed by the wrists, laughing, her gold hoops swinging as she twirled across the kitchen tiles. "Mijo, life doesn't wait for you to be ready. You have to move while it's still playing." He was 8 the first time he tried to follow her steps. Clumsy. All elbows and knees. But she never let go. Even after she got sick. Even when the hospital room replaced the kitchen. Even when her voice grew thin and her hands trembled, she still moved her fingers to the rhythm only she could hear. On the last day, she whispered, "Don't stop moving, amor. Promise me." He promised. And then, somehow, he forgot. Grief became discipline. Love became performance. And the boy who danced disappeared into the man who measured worth in quarterly reports and unbroken focus. By 35, he ran a billion-dollar tech empire from a glass tower downtown. By 40, he hadn't cried in over a decade. And by the time Maria stepped into his life, hired through a staffing agency, quiet, efficient, always 5 minutes early, he hadn't heard music in years. But she brought it anyway. Not loudly. Never demanding attention. Just in the way she hummed while dusting the bookshelves. In how she paused near the window every afternoon, letting the sun warm her face for exactly 3 breaths. In the faint tap of her foot when she thought no one was watching. He noticed. Of course he noticed. He noticed everything. But he said nothing. Until that morning. Until she danced. And something deep inside him, a place long buried, flinched awake. When she didn't show up the next day, he told himself it was fine. She was replaceable. Staff came and went. He hired someone new by lunchtime. A younger woman, crisp uniform, references flawless. But within an hour, he sent her away. The apartment felt wrong. Too quiet. Too still. Like the air itself was holding its breath. He walked through the rooms, searching for what was missing. Nothing was out of place. The vases gleamed. The sheets were hospital-cornered tight. Even the pillows were fluffed to perfection. But it wasn't right. It wasn't her. He found the first clue in the kitchen. A single tea bag, tucked behind the sugar jar. Chamomile. He didn't drink chamomile. She did. Every night before leaving, she'd steep 1 cup, sip half, leave the rest to cool. Not waste. Just ritual. He held the small yellow packet between his fingers. And suddenly he could smell her. Not perfume, not soap, but the faintest trace of vanilla and rain, the scent that lingered where she'd cleaned, moved, breathed. His chest tightened. Why did this matter? Why did a used tea bag feel like a key to something he'd lost? He went to his office, pulled up her file. Maria Elena Ruiz. Age, 58. Hometown, San Salvador. Employment history, 12 years as housekeeper at St. Clair's Hospital. Reason for leaving, family care. No disciplinary records. 1 commendation, for kindness beyond duty. He scrolled down, then froze. Attached to her application, a scanned letter, written in shaky Spanish, translated below. Dear Hiring Committee, I write about Maria, who cared for my husband in his final days. He could not speak, but when she played music, he smiled. When she held his hand, he squeezed once, his only movement in weeks. She danced with him in his wheelchair, just once, around the garden. He died 2 days later, peaceful. I do not know if she remembers. But I do. And I thank God for her. He read it twice. Then a third time. His throat burned. He slammed the laptop shut. This wasn't grief. It couldn't be. He was Alexander Voss. He didn't feel things like this. But that night, sleep didn't come. Instead, memories did. His mother's voice. The weight of her hand in his. The way she used to say, music is prayer with rhythm. And Maria dancing alone in his empty apartment as if offering a silent hymn to the morning. Was that what she was doing? Offering? Not performing. Not disrespecting. But giving. He sat up, heart pounding. What if firing her wasn't strength? What if it was fear? Fear of feeling. Fear of remembering. Fear of the truth he'd spent 20 years running from. He missed dancing. He missed joy. He missed being seen. Not as a CEO, but as a man. He found her at dawn. Not at her apartment, she'd already moved out, subletting to a nurse from Guatemala. But at the community center near the subway, where she volunteered twice a week. She was sweeping the stage when he arrived, wearing a faded blue sweater and sneakers with frayed laces. He stood in the doorway, unable to speak. She looked up. Her eyes widened, then narrowed. You shouldn't be here, she said quietly. I know. You made yourself clear yesterday. I was wrong. Silence. The broom rested against her shoulder like a staff. Outside, the city woke, buses groaned, birds argued in the trees, a distant siren wailed like a forgotten cry. Inside, the air trembled. Why are you here? She asked. Because I need to ask you something. Ask. Will you dance with me? She didn't move. What? Not here. Not now. But someday. If you'll teach me. If you'll come back. You fired me for dancing. I fired you because I was afraid. Afraid of what? Of remembering. Of feeling. Of becoming someone I don't recognize. And who is that? Someone who dances. Someone who cries. Someone who isn't afraid to be soft. She studied him. Then, slowly, she leaned the broom against the wall. And walked to the old piano in the corner. Dusty. Out of tune. She pressed one key. A single note rang out, slightly flat, but true. Music doesn't care if it's perfect, she said. It only cares if it's real. She turned to him. I'll come back. But not to clean. To remind you. That you're still alive. He nodded, tears slipping free before he could stop them. Then she did something unexpected. She reached into her pocket. Pulled out a small, worn cassette tape. Handwritten label. Para mi hijo, mamá. My mother's voice, she said. She used to sing to me. Every night. I kept this for 30 years. I want you to have it. He took it like it was sacred. Because it was. Not because of the tape. But because she trusted him with her pain. With her past. With her song. Weeks passed. The penthouse changed. Not in ways anyone would notice at first. The art stayed. The furniture remained. But now, music played in the mornings. Soft at first. Then louder. Now, There was a second teacup on the counter. Now, the curtains were open. Now, sometimes, late at night, if you stood outside his building and looked up, you might see two silhouettes moving behind the glass. Slow at first, then faster, twirling, laughing, dancing. And on the bookshelf, between biographies and business plans, sat a small cassette player. And beside it, a note in neat handwriting. Play when you forget. One evening, 6 months later, Maria didn't come. No call. No message. He waited. Then drove to her apartment. Knocked. No answer. He called the center. They told him she'd been hospitalized. Stroke. Sudden. Critical. He arrived at the hospital in 10 minutes, tie loose, shoes untied. She was unconscious. Wires everywhere. A machine breathing for her. He sat beside her, gripping her hand. And then, he did the one thing he never thought he'd do. He sang. Off-key. Shaky. Voice breaking. But he sang the lullaby from the tape. The one her mother used to sing. Halfway through, her fingers twitched. Then, faintly, her lips moved. Not words. A hum. Matching his tone. Tears fell freely now. He kept singing. Louder. Until a nurse paused at the door. Then another. Then, from somewhere down the hall, a piano. Someone had turned on the lobby radio. A soft melody floated in. And without thinking, he began to sway. Still holding her hand. Still singing. And though she never opened her eyes that night, her feet, just once, tapped the rhythm. 3 beats. Clear as a bell. She recovered. Slowly. Speech returned. Movement, too. But she wouldn't come back to the penthouse. I'm retiring, she told him gently. Time to go home. See my sister. Rest. He didn't argue. Instead, he showed up at her farewell party held in the same community center where he'd found her. People crowded the room, neighbors, volunteers, kids from the after-school program. And in the middle, a small stage. He walked up, heart in his throat. Held a microphone. I wasn't going to speak, he began. I've spent my life believing silence is power. But Maria taught me something. That the bravest thing a person can do is share their song. He stepped aside. And then, something no one expected. He pressed play on a portable speaker. And music filled the room. Not corporate event music. Not background noise. A live recording. His mother's voice. Singing in Spanish. Warm. Rich. Full of love. The room fell silent. Then, someone clapped. Then another. Then everyone rose. And they danced. Old and young. Strangers and friends. Even him. Clumsy. Awkward. Tears on his cheeks. But dancing. Really dancing. For the first time in decades. And in that moment, Alexander Voss wasn't a CEO. Wasn't an icon. Wasn't the Ice King. He was just a man. Remembering how to live. Years later, a documentary crew asked him, "What changed you?" He didn't mention profits. Or innovation. Or legacy. He held up a worn cassette tape. "This," he said. "And a woman who danced in my kitchen." They laughed. But he wasn't smiling. "I fired her for being human," he said. "And she saved me by staying that way." If this story touched your heart, share one word below that describes the emotion you feel right now.